You're not afraid of the market. You're afraid of what the market reveals about you. That's the part most traders never admit, the part they feel but cannot name. Because every time you open a chart, you're not just analyzing price. You're staring into a mirror that shows you the confidence you pretend to have, the hesitation you hide, the fear you try to outsmart, the version of yourself you're still negotiating with. You think you're reading the market, but the market is reading you. You don't freeze because the setup is unclear. You freeze because uncertainty exposes you. You don't exit early because the chart tells you to. You exit because holding requires trust, and trust requires a version of you you're still trying to become. You've told yourself you just need more discipline, more knowledge, more confirmation. But confirmation has never been the thing you're after. You're chasing certainty because deep down, certainty is the only place your identity feels safe. A green day makes you feel capable. A red day makes you question everything. One win and you breathe again. One loss and your mind tightens around old doubts you hoped you left behind. I once worked with a trader who didn't fear losing money. He feared losing the image he held of himself. Every trade was a test he didn't want to fail. Every loss was a story he didn't want to relive. He wasn't trading the market. He was trading his worth. And maybe you felt that too. Maybe there were moments when you weren't scared of the trade. You were scared of what the result might say about you. Moments when you were more focused on protecting identity than following process. Moments when your mind was louder than the chart. This is where most traders stay stuck. Not because they lack skill, but because they never learned to separate who they are from what a single outcome tells them. But here's the truth you've been circling around without fully seeing it. You don't build confidence by winning. You build confidence by no longer needing the win to feel whole. And that's where your real journey begins. Because if the chart is a mirror, then everything you fear, everything you avoid, everything you fight isn't out there, it's in you. And once you understand that, the entire game changes. If you've ever felt that quiet tension between who you are and who you're afraid you might be, the next part will finally show you why the struggle runs deeper than the market and how to break it from the inside. Before we can talk about confidence, we need to talk about identity. Because somewhere along the way, without noticing, without intending, without ever saying it out loud, you started tying who you are to what your trades become. It's subtle, it's quiet, it grows slowly. A win makes you feel capable, a loss makes you feel flawed. A good day lifts your chest, a bad one tightens your breath. One green streak and you feel in control, then one red afternoon and your entire sense of self feels like it's slipping. You call it discipline, you call it performance, you call it doing better next time. But beneath all of that, there's something deeper happening. You're letting outcomes shape your identity. That's why hesitation feels heavy, why uncertainty feels threatening, why a single losing trade can change your entire internal weather. It's not that you don't understand the setup. It's not that you lack the skill. It's that every decision feels like a quiet test of who you are. And no one ever taught you how to separate the trader from the human being. Think about it. How many times have you hesitated? Not because the chart was unclear, but because you were unsure of yourself? How many times have you exited early? Not because the structure changed, but because you couldn't hold the discomfort of possibility? How many times have you held a loser, not because it made sense, but because you couldn't accept what taking that loss might mean? This is the part of trading no one talks about. Not the technical side, not the strategy side, but the part where your self-worth quietly fuses with your results. And once that fusion happens, everything becomes personal. Every move becomes emotional. Every outcome becomes a statement. But here's the clarity you've been missing. The market isn't testing you. It's revealing you, revealing the beliefs you carry, revealing the pressure you hide, revealing the version of yourself you're terrified of disappointing. You're not failing. You're not broken. You're not undisciplined. you're simply trading with your identity on the line. And no one can trade well with their self-worth at stake. But the moment you see this, you gain something rare, a separation between who you are and what the chart does, a space between your value and your results, a breath between your intention and your reaction. And that space is the beginning of real confidence, the kind that doesn't depend on outcomes. So if this identity fusion is the real source of your struggle, what exactly happens inside you the moment uncertainty appears? That's where the true conflict begins, and it's deeper than you think. There's a moment every trader experiences, a moment so familiar it almost feels normal. The setup is clean, the structure is aligned, the signal is there. Everything you've studied says go, and yet something inside you resists. Your hand hesitates, your breath tightens, your mind begins to whisper doubts that weren't there a second ago. It's strange how clarity on the chart can coexist with chaos inside, but that's where the real conflict begins. Because on the surface, you believe the battle is between you and the market. But beneath it, the war is entirely internal. There are two forces within you. One force wants to grow, wants to trust, wants to take the trade, wants to step into the next version of yourself. The other force wants safety, wants comfort, wants control, wants to avoid any situation where your identity might feel threatened. And every time you face uncertainty, these two forces collide. You tell yourself you're waiting for confirmation. You tell yourself you're being careful. You tell yourself you're following your rules. But deep down, you're not protecting your account. You're protecting your identity. Because taking the trade means exposing yourself to being wrong. Holding the trade means sitting with discomfort you haven't mastered. Letting the trade play out means surrendering control you don't want to lose. So your mind does the only thing it knows how to do. It tries to keep you safe. It hesitates. It overanalyzes. It imagines worst-case scenarios. It creates emotional noise to stop you from stepping into risk. Not because you're incapable, but because it believes your sense of self might be in danger. This is why you know better, but still can't execute. Why you journal the same mistakes, even after understanding the logic. Why you promise yourself change, but fall back into old patterns. The moment uncertainty appears, the conflict isn't about discipline. It's about identity. You want growth, but growth requires exposure. You want confidence, but confidence requires surrender. You want consistency, but consistency requires trust. And trust is the very thing your protective mind fears. Because trusting your edge means releasing the need for guarantees. And your identity, as it stands now, is built on needing those guarantees to feel safe. This is the internal war. The part of you that wants to evolve versus the part of you that wants to avoid anything that might hurt the image you hold of yourself. Until you see this clearly, you will remain stuck between intention and action, between what you want and what you're afraid to feel. But here's the truth. The hesitation isn't weakness. It's a protective mechanism. And protective mechanisms follow patterns. Patterns you can understand. Patterns you can recognize. Patterns you can break. Because this inner war doesn't burst into chaos all at once. It starts with something small. A trigger so subtle you barely notice it. And once that trigger fires, the emotional loop begins. That's where we go next. And you need to see it clearly. The internal war never starts with a dramatic moment. It starts with something small. So small you barely notice it. A tiny hesitation, a flicker of doubt, a shift in your breathing, a little spike of tension in your chest. At first, it seems harmless, just a moment. But that moment is the trigger, a trigger that activates memories you didn't realize were still alive. Memories of a loss that stung, a mistake you promised wouldn't happen again, a trade that spiraled out of control. A day you still carry in silence. Your mind doesn't see the present chart. It sees every chart that ever hurt you. And this is where the loop begins. Step 1, the trigger. It's rarely dramatic. A candle pulls back unexpectedly. A breakout hesitates. A pattern looks almost, but not quite right. A voice inside says, be careful. You think you're reacting to price, but you're reacting to a past wound. Step 2, the interpretation. This is where everything shifts, from objective to emotional. Your brain doesn't interpret the moment as new, it interprets it as familiar. It links it to every failure, every embarrassment, every regret you haven't processed. The chart stops being information and becomes projection. Not a projection of market logic, a projection of old fear. You're no longer asking, is this a good trade? You're asking, what if this becomes another version of the past? And when the past becomes your lens, you lose sight of the present. Step 3, the reaction. This is where the loop hijacks you completely. You chase trades not because they're high probability, but because you fear missing out and feeling inadequate. You freeze not because the setup changed, but because taking action feels like risking your identity. You exit early not because structure shifted, but because holding uncertainty feels like holding a burning coal. You hold losers not because it's rational, but because closing them feels like admitting something painful. None of these reactions come from your plan. None come from your knowledge. None come from logic. They come from protection. Protection from feeling exposed. Protection from reliving the past. Protection from the discomfort your mind has decided it cannot handle. And the loop reinforces itself. You hesitate. You feel anxious about hesitating. You act impulsively to escape the anxiety. The result feels chaotic. You fear chaos even more. The next hesitation grows stronger. The loop tightens. The spiral approaches. And the most painful part, you think it's just trading, but it isn't. It's your emotional history masquerading as your trading behavior. It's your mind trying to shield you from feelings you've never learned to sit with. And if you don't see this clearly, the loop will run you quietly, predictably, relentlessly. But here's the truth. A loop can't control you. Once you can see the pattern inside it, and when you look closely, you'll notice the loop always leads to the same destination. A downward pull you've felt many times before, because once the loop begins, it doesn't stay subtle for long. It intensifies, it accelerates, it becomes something much heavier, a force that drags you into the emotional spiral that has sabotaged you again and again. And that spiral is what we're about to unravel next. The loop doesn't stay quiet. It doesn't stay small. Once it activates, it deepens, and the shift is unmistakable. You feel it before you can name it. A tightening, a heat in the chest, a subtle rush of urgency that wasn't there a moment ago. This is where your internal world begins to slip out of balance. Phase 1, tension turns into urgency. At first, it feels like pressure, a gentle push to do something. Then that pressure grows louder. Your mind speeds up. Your breathing shortens. Your focus narrows to the one thing you fear the most, the possibility of being wrong. You're no longer evaluating the market. You're managing a rising emotional storm, a storm that demands action, not because action is wise, but because action feels like relief. Phase 2, urgency becomes desperation. In this phase, you stop trading to execute a plan. You start trading to escape a feeling. You click early because waiting feels unbearable. You cut winners because uncertainty burns your nerves. You hold losers because closing them feels like surrender. Your decisions don't feel like choices. They feel like reactions. Instinctive, compulsive, inevitable. You tell yourself you'll regain control after this one trade, after this one fix, after this one moment passes. But the moment doesn't pass, it deepens. Phase 3, the flood. This is the point of collapse, the moment when emotion overwhelms logic completely. Your screen stops feeling like a tool. It starts feeling like a threat. Every candle feels personal. Every pullback feels like rejection. Every move against you feels like confirmation of the fear you've been carrying. You act faster. You breathe sharper. You think less. The market becomes a blur, a storm you're trying to outrun. You're not trying to win anymore. You're trying not to drown. And in the midst of it, a painful truth appears. You're not afraid of losing money. You're afraid of losing the version of yourself you're desperately trying to protect. Phase 4, the breaking point. Eventually, something gives. Maybe it's the revenge trade you knew was coming. Maybe it's the oversized position you justified in a moment of panic. Maybe it's the final, impulsive click that turns a manageable day into something much heavier. And then it hits, the drop in your chest, the sinking feeling, the sharp wave of self-blame. You stare at the screen, and the question echoes, what is wrong with me? You're not judging the trade. You're judging yourself. And that's the core of the spiral. It doesn't destroy your account first. It destroys your identity, because the spiral convinces you that every mistake is who you are. Every loss defines you. Every moment of fear reveals your weakness. And the deeper you fall, the more you believe the story. But here's the truth. The spiral never wants you to see. You're not broken. Your mind is simply trying to protect you in the only way it knows how. It shields you from uncertainty by pushing you into control. It shields you from discomfort by forcing action. It shields you from identity threat by sabotaging what you're capable of. The spiral is not a sign of failure. It's a sign of attachment. Attachment to outcome, attachment to identity, attachment to control. And once you understand this, you're closer to freedom than you think. Because the spiral doesn't end by fighting it. It ends by shifting how you see the game entirely. Not as a place to prove yourself, but as a place where probabilities play out without touching who you are. That shift starts in the next phase, and it will change everything. There comes a moment when the emotional spiral becomes unbearable. And in that moment, you finally understand something essential. You were never supposed to control the market. You were supposed to understand it, not to tame it, not to predict it, not to bend it to your expectations. Just understand it. And the moment that understanding arrives, everything shifts. Because the way out of the spiral is not through force, not through discipline, not through trying harder. It's through a change in perspective, a change so simple. Most traders overlook it. Stop thinking like a trader. Start thinking like a casino. A casino doesn't fear randomness. It doesn't panic when someone wins big. It doesn't unravel during losing streaks. It doesn't beg for certainty before each outcome. A casino operates with calm, not because it controls results, but because it understands them. It doesn't need to know the next outcome, to trust its edge. It doesn't need to avoid losses, to remain confident. It doesn't confuse short-term noise with long-term truth. It thinks in distributions, in probabilities, in large numbers. In the big picture, it knows a simple, powerful truth. Individual outcomes are meaningless. Only the series matters. And once you adopt this mindset, your relationship with the market transforms. Imagine this. You take a loss and feel nothing collapse inside you. You see uncertainty, and your breath remains steady. A setup hesitates, and you don't rush to control it. You follow your plan, not because you know what will happen, but because you understand that knowing is unnecessary. This is the beginning of true psychological freedom, because when you think like a casino, you no longer tie your identity to any single moment. You stop making every trade a statement about who you are. You stop searching for validation in every outcome. You stop using wins to inflate your confidence and losses to destroy it. You detach, not out of coldness, but out of clarity. And clarity is what breaks the spiral. You begin to see each trade as one event inside a much larger game. You begin to see risk as the cost of participation, not a threat to your worth. You begin to see uncertainty as space for opportunity, not danger. This shift doesn't make you emotionless. It makes you grounded. A casino doesn't celebrate the wins or mourn the losses. It simply continues, patient, consistent, unshaken. Imagine bringing that steadiness into your trading. Imagine acting without the weight of constant self-protection. Imagine executing without the pressure of proving anything. Imagine trusting the math, the edge, the process, more than the fear inside you. This is what the best traders embody. Not confidence from outcomes, confidence from alignment. Alignment with process, alignment with probability, alignment with who they want to be. And once you step into this mindset, the emotional spiral loses its power. You stop playing a survival game. You start playing a probabilistic one. You stop reacting. You start observing. You stop trading from fear. You start trading from clarity. Because the secret that casinos understand, and most traders never learn, is simple. You don't need to know the next outcome when you trust the long-term edge. And this trust is what creates stability, not artificial confidence, not forced discipline, not emotional suppression, real stability, the kind that stays with you, even in the most uncertain moments. Rehook. And once you no longer need certainty, something extraordinary happens inside you. A shift so deep, it changes the entire way you trade and the entire way you see yourself. That moment is coming next. There's a moment in every trader's growth when something inside finally softens. Not because the market becomes easier, not because losses disappear, not because certainty arrives, but because you stop demanding certainty. It happens quietly, almost silently, like an exhale you didn't realize you've been holding for years. It's the moment you stop needing to know what comes next. You still care, you still observe, you still execute, but the tightness is gone. The pressure dissolves. The emotional weight that once sat on your shoulders feels lighter. Not because the world changed, but because your relationship with it did. Up until now, you've carried a belief without noticing it. If I don't know what comes next, I'm not safe. That belief was the root of every spiral, every hesitation, every moment you tried to force control, every time you asked the market for reassurance it could never give. But now, you no longer cling to that belief. You don't need to predict. You don't need to control. You don't need the market to confirm you're on the right path. Because clarity doesn't come from knowing the outcome. It comes from knowing yourself. This is the payoff. The moment when you stop chasing confidence and begin embodying it. Imagine stepping into a trade without the internal noise, no bargaining, no self-doubt, no desperate need for the chart to make you feel okay. Imagine seeing a losing candle and feeling no collapse inside. Just observation, just presence, just acceptance. Imagine taking a win without letting it inflate your worth. A win is a data point, not an identity boost. Imagine missing a setup and simply moving on. No punishment, no shame, no story. This version of you exists on the other side of letting go. Letting go of the need to know. Letting go of the need to be right. Letting go of the belief that outcomes determine who you are. Because once you stop needing certainty, you stop fearing uncertainty. And when uncertainty no longer scares you, you finally become present. Present enough to see the chart for what it is, not for what you fear. Present enough to act with clarity instead of survival. Present enough to follow your edge without emotional distortion. This is the shift the best traders carry. Not supernatural calm, not robotic detachment, not emotionless execution, just a simple, grounded truth. I don't need to know the outcome to trust my ability to navigate it. That is real confidence, not the fragile kind built on winning streaks, not the conditional kind based on results, but the steady, internal kind that remains intact, even when the market moves against you. You cannot buy this confidence. You cannot force it. You cannot hack it. You grow into it by releasing the need to know, by understanding that trading was never about prediction. It was about presence, by realizing that your worth was never meant to be measured in ticks, percentages, or outcomes. And once this becomes clear, Your entire emotional landscape changes. You don't trade to escape discomfort. You don't trade to validate identity. You don't trade to fix the past. You don't trade to prove you belong. You trade because the process is yours. The edge is yours. The mindset is yours. And the calm comes from within. So now the real question becomes a question only you can answer. What version of you will show up at the chart tomorrow? The one chasing certainty or the one finally free from needing it? We've walked through uncertainty, through conflict, through the spiral, through the shift into clarity. But now, everything comes down to one question. Not a technical question, not a psychological exercise, not something you can solve with logic alone. A question about you. Are you trading to prove something? Or are you trading from a place of trust? Only you can answer that. Because if you're trading to prove you can win, you'll keep chasing the market. You'll keep forcing certainty. You'll keep using outcomes to negotiate your self-worth. And every loss will feel heavier than it should. Every hesitation will feel like a flaw. Every moment of uncertainty will pull you back into the loop you've been trying so hard to escape. But if you're ready, truly ready, to trade from trust, trust in your edge, trust in your process, trust in your ability to navigate uncertainty, trust in yourself, then something shifts internally. You stop demanding reassurance. You stop bargaining with the screen. You stop letting outcomes decide who you are. Your confidence no longer swings. With every tick, your emotional state no longer depends on today's results. Your identity no longer clings to the market's approval. You become steady, not because everything goes your way, but because you stop needing it to. So ask yourself gently, honestly, what version of you is showing up tomorrow? The version trying to prove worth through every trade, or the version who understands that worth was never the market's to decide? Only one of these versions leads to freedom. Only one leads to clarity. Only one leads to the trader you know you can become. And that choice begins right now. Because the final truth is this: your edge was never in predicting the future. It was always in the steadiness of your mind. And that truth is what we close with next. When the charts close and the noise fades, you're left with something far more important than entries, exits, or outcomes. You're left with yourself. Not the version shaped by winning streaks, not the version bruised by losses, not the version constantly negotiating worth. With every candle, the real you, steady, aware, present, has always been underneath the noise. And now, after everything you've seen, everything you've felt, everything you've confronted within yourself, you finally understand a truth most traders never reach. Your real edge was never in predicting the market. It was in mastering the space between your intention and your reaction. That space is where clarity lives, where confidence grows, where emotional freedom begins. It's where you stop trading to defend identity and start trading from presence. Where outcomes stop defining you and start informing you. Where uncertainty stops being a threat and becomes an environment you know how to move through. Because once your identity untangles from results, the market loses its power over you. It can move fast or slow, with you or against you. But your center remains the same: calm, grounded, unshakable. This is the steadiness the best traders carry. Not because they know the future, but because they no longer need to. And that's the shift you've just stepped into. A shift from reaction to awareness, from attachment to clarity, from chasing certainty to trusting yourself. So as you walk away from this video, as you return to the screen, to the process, to the journey, remember this: the market doesn't give you confidence. It reveals whether you've built it, and now you're building it from the inside out. Once your mind is steady, once your identity is free, once your confidence comes from within, you don't just trade better, you become unshakable.